There is a common belief that learning one foreign language is difficult, and learning many is almost impossible. What if the opposite were true? What if learning languages actually becomes easier the more languages you know? Over the past 5 decades, I've lived, worked, and studied across multiple countries, using more than 30 languages and more than a dozen in a great variety of domains. And what I've experienced again and again is what researchers call the multilingual factor. The multilingual factor is a simple but powerful idea. Each new language you learn doesn't just add to your knowledge, it actually changes the way that your brain learns. In other words, language learning becomes cumulative. The first language is the hardest. It forces you to step outside your identity, to think in a completely new way. But once you've done that, everything changes. You begin to recognize patterns in vocabulary, in grammar, in phonetics. Languages that once seemed completely foreign suddenly feel familiar. When I first went to Italy, I had never studied Italian, but I already spoke Spanish, Portuguese, and French fluently. Right away, I understood most of conversations, and within days, I understood more and more complex things. And within weeks, I wasn't just making myself understood using the other Romance languages I knew. I was actually using much more Italian, not perfectly, but effectively, because I wasn't starting from zero. The same thing happens across language families. After learning several Slavic languages, Serbo-Croatian and Russian and Polish being my first 3, I found that I could understand Czech and Slovak almost immediately and actually carried on a conversation the first time I heard Slovak. I simply used a mix between the Slavic languages I knew, mainly Polish and Croatian in this case, and on the fly began to see what was different in Slovak and then adjust the way I spoke. The same thing happened after learning Thai and going to Laos. I could communicate well on my very first visit there. Why? Because I wasn't just learning languages anymore. I was learning how languages work. What are the patterns that make them similar and different? And these are very important factors when we're talking about languages that are close to one another. So this is where the multilingual factor becomes even more powerful. You develop what we might call metacognitive awareness. You begin to understand how you learn best, how to deal with unfamiliar sounds, how to adapt to new grammatical systems, and most importantly, you become more comfortable with uncertainty. You stop needing everything to be perfectly clear. You start communicating earlier, and that accelerates everything. There's also a physical dimension to this. Modern research in neuroscience shows that learning languages actually changes the brain as any learning does. Studies have found increases in gray matter density and improvements in neural connectivity even in adults. And these changes can happen quickly. So language learning is not just mental training. It's creating new neural networks and a new way for your brain to process all the aspects of the language that you are learning. Another key aspect is sound or phonetics. Every language has its own set of phonemes or sounds, and of course its own rhythm and prosody. When you learn multiple languages, you train your ear to hear distinctions that others simply don't notice. For example, sounds that exist in Thai also appear in languages like Hindi and Nepali. Because I had already learned Thai when I started studying these languages, I could immediately distinguish between these sounds when I encountered them. The same applies to tonal languages. If you've learned one tonal language, like Standard Chinese, it becomes much easier to learn others, like Thai, Lao, or Vietnamese. You're no longer hearing just noise. You're hearing structure. And then there's the rhythm, what linguists call prosody. English is stress-timed, Spanish is syllable-timed, and Japanese is mora-timed. A mora is a single phonetic unit. If you carry the rhythm of your native language into another language, you will always sound foreign. But with experience, you learn to adapt. You learn to feel the language. But the multilingual factor is not just cognitive, it's also psychological and attitudinal. Every new language you learn forces you to step into a new identity if you really want to sound like a native-like speaker and become more fluent. You have to create this identity and sense of belonging to that language and the culture associated with it. It also creates a new way of thinking, a new way of interacting. Over time, this leads to something deeper, what we might call transformation. You become more flexible, more open, more capable of seeing the world from different perspectives. And this may be the most important point of all. Becoming multilingual is not just about communication. It's about expanding your understanding of reality itself. Because we don't experience the world directly. We experience it through language, culture, and perception. The more languages you know, the more versions of reality you can access. Some people say that learning languages is a special talent. I don't believe that, and I made a video about it. What I've seen, both in my own experience and in the experience of other polyglots, is that success comes from motivation, passion, consistency, and the willingness to adapt to linguistic differences as well as cultural differences. The real secret is this: the more languages you learn, the easier it becomes to learn the next one. Not because you're gifted, but because you are transforming the way you learn, the way you think, the way you perceive, the way you process language. And once that transformation begins, you'll experience language learning and usage in a totally new way. It will become more interesting and less of a struggle. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video. If you're passionate about languages and cultures, head over to polyglotdreams.com, where you'll find my memoir, A Life in 30 Languages. It's available in multiple languages, including dual language editions and versions with audio narration, perfect for learners who want to combine
reading and listening for deeper study. In this memoir, I share my adventures in 99 countries to the date I wrote the book, along with insights on how to learn languages best, drawn from my own experiences and research as a professor of cross-cultural management. Whether you're a polyglot, a language learner, or simply curious about the world, it's a resource to inspire and inform. So don't forget to visit Polyglot Dreams, the link is in the description, to explore the memoir and expand your language horizon.